The worst performance of the season last night for the Charlotte Hornets, no doubt about it. They fall to the Minnesota Timberwolves. Why? Why do they fall to the Timberwolves? We'll talk about it all today. Locked On Hornets.
Why?
You are Locked On Hornets, your daily Charlotte Hornets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free. We're available anywhere you get your pods, and that does include YouTube. It hits you this time. It's the most dejected, I think, that our fan base has been since the start of the season, because that was a bad one. We'll get to it in a moment, but you can see Doug. He's pouting on the microphone. He's more depressed on the microphone. You can see him and read his content on his substack, everyhornetsboxscore.com. I'm Walker Mail. Listen to me on WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. I'm still not done. Still got to give some shout-outs. Your favorite podcast now has a newsletter introducing the Locked On Hornets daily newsletter. One stop for the ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com. And start your day with the all-new free Locked On Hornets newsletter. Also, this episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time?
Game time?
Yeah, sad game time today. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. The Hornets, they lose last night, 114-93. They fall to 2-5 on the season after last night's loss to Minnesota. The starters were Brandon Miller. Great. He suited up after being questionable with the glute strain and injury management. Miles Bridges, LaMelo Ball. Josh Green was back out there. Played decent amount more minutes, 26 minutes for him. That's great. And then we go to the center position, Doug. And, well, we see Taj Gibson starting. No Nick Richards. No Mark Williams. You're having to go to Tijan Salon and Grant Williams and Moussa Diabate, who played 11 minutes last night, playing the front court. And, well, I guess that's how it goes down with Rudy Gobert. Not even destroying you, honestly, it offensively, like I thought. There were some dominant moments for him, but it was really the bench for Minnesota. Naz Reid, 25 points. Dante DiVincenzo had a couple of tough buckets. One in particular scored 14, and it was the bench, and it was just the size, and it was the lack of offense for the Hornets as to why they fell so poorly. Bad performance all around. The worst one, I think, on the young season.
So, look, this was always going to be a difficult game without two centers, because it was less about Rudy Gobert dominating or not dominating and more about the strength and the size of Minnesota and their ability to get to the rim, particularly Anthony Edwards. But then, of course, Naz Reid did a little bit of work inside, but most of it was 5 of 7 from 3. Came down to some defensive mistakes up top, whether it was LaMelo and Cody Martin miscommunicating, or LaMelo and Miles miscommunicating, or just something, or one was LaMelo and Tijan on a switch, and nobody goes to, it was a screen-the-screener kind of play where Rudy Gobert ends up screening LaMelo out of the play and Naz Reid hits the 3. So there were all kinds of issues across the floor defensively for the Charlotte Hornets, and I think that's expected. Again, when you have no one that's any kind of threat near the basket, which Mark Williams would have been, which Nick Richards to a certain extent would have been, then you're going to have issues. I think the more frustrating thing for me watching this game was some of the offensive issues that this team had, whether it was turnovers to be 2 straight turnovers to begin the second quarter by LaMelo Ball, or whether it was when LaMelo Ball was off the floor, the inability for the Charlotte Hornets to move the basketball effectively. I mean, so many possessions ended up with like passes going nowhere, just around the perimeter, not enough paint touches, guys not knowing where the ball is supposed to go. I think some of that is Brandon Miller kind of getting back into, off of this injury and back into the groove where he can take more command of the offense. Part of it is Vasa Micic chewing gum on the sideline in a t-shirt and not in a jersey because he came into this season not ready to play. I mean, there's just so, before we even get into the LaMelo stuff, the fouling at the end of the third quarter, the miserable end of that third quarter, we will get to it. But there are issues that extend far beyond LaMelo Ball. And the reason I'm dejected, Walker, is because I can't believe we're back here. I can't believe we're still here with no centers, no backup point guards, fundamental issues due to injuries, but also due to just guys not knowing how to play defense. It's not that they're not trying hard. It's that there's just a lot of guys making mistakes out there on the defensive end of the floor. And it's just like, this goes back to Borrego, man. I just can't believe we're back here.
So I think, okay, allow me to serve as this beacon of hope, because what happens is we can go through the last few games and see that the Hornets played a team that won the NBA championship twice and a team that got to the Western Conference Finals last year. Even if it's a new look team, this was a really difficult portion of the schedule where you're taking on two teams in 3 games that were among the 4 best teams in all of the NBA. This is why I went out on a radio limb and said that the Raptors game was a must-win, because I did not feel great about the chances for Charlotte.
In retrospect, you were right.
I didn't feel great about the Hornets' chances of getting the win against Boston. I thought maybe we could be competitive, and you want to be competitive in every one of these games. And they were against Boston in a couple of those outings. It got away late. We know the refs. We've already done that show. Minnesota didn't have a shot. You thought this would get ugly. I thought this would get ugly. I mean, we prefaced this in our preview yesterday when we said, yeah, man, when you don't have size, when you don't have a center that you can depend on, it could get ugly against that squad where Julius Randle is just a bulldog doing whatever he wants. Anthony Edwards, also the same thing. They bring a type of mentality. Oh, yeah, and then they have this defensive player of the year, multiple time kind of guy in Rudy Gobert. So I don't know how much we learned about the Hornets and what is a trend in just such a 6, 7, 8 game sample size and that 3 game specific stretch for this squad. There are some things that are concerning, but we know that Brandon Miller is also coming back from injury. How much of a rhythm can he get coming back from injury? I think that allows LaMelo to play make more, where Brandon is just going to be set up and hitting more shots. Miles Bridges, is this real? Because he's been struggling. And also, they got to get some center, whether it's Nick Richards back or Mark Williams at some point back. I just think before it's all the way doom, no doubt, bad performance offensively. It was not only of the Hornets season, but it was one of the least, maybe the least efficient performance offensively from any team in the NBA this year, according to Cleaning the Glass. They were in the first percentile in points per possession last night of all games played so far. So, look, it was terrible. I just don't know how much of this we can take away and then paste it. This is what we're going to see going forward. We're back again, right? Like, I just don't know if that's okay to say that we're back here again.
Well, I don't want to go back. Okay.
No,
we're not going back. Okay. I don't want to go back.
Nice fitting for today.
But the thing is, I'm not doom and gloom. I'm just frustrated that we're dealing with, because again, I understand the fundamental issues of this game, not having Mark Williams and Nick Richards, but that doesn't excuse some of the other issues on this team, including Miles Bridges, who had a good game defensively, keeping Randle away from his spots. And he had, I think, more than 5 assists in this game. He was doing good things, but he can't hit the ocean. I mean, his 3-point shot is missing. It's not just missing. It's missing terribly. It pains me to watch him shoot the basketball. And that's a problem because they paid him a lot of money to come in and maybe not be a 20-point per game scorer like he was last season, but not 4 of 13 from the field, 1 of 6 from 3, and just awful offensively. Trey Mann, God love him, he is hitting difficult shots. He is an extremely great shot maker. He's being put in a position to make plays when LaMelo Ball is off the floor, and he can't do it. And then when LaMelo Ball is on the floor, particularly when he's on the floor with the bench, he is absolutely pressing. I don't know if it was the early Brandon Miller injury. Just something seems to have clicked in his head where he's like, I got to do everything. And he's turning the basketball over. He's making horrible decisions in terms of fouling. The end of that third quarter where they actually made a run. They made 2 runs in the third quarter. And the one at the end was led by LaMelo, who put his head down, finally stopped taking these low-quality, quick 3-point shots that were killing the offensive rhythm. He put his head down, got to the free throw line, and everything was looking good. And then 30 seconds left in the quarter, he throws up an awful deep 3-point attempt. It was short. Then he tries to go after it. Of course, he gets called for the loose ball foul. That was foul number 2. And then 8 seconds left, LaMelo misses the catch and shoot 3. DiVincenzo gets it in transition. And In the bonus, he takes a transition take foul with 8 seconds to go in the third quarter. I wrote in my notes, what in the absolute world was he thinking? And that's your best player. When your best player is making those kinds of plays to end of third quarter, I might as well have written in my game notes, game over.
What's a trend? What's not? The LaMelo stuff, kind of a trend. Let's get to that on the other side. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Bees everywhere!
Doug was frustrated. I was frustrated. Charles Lee was frustrated last night. We have more comments from Charles Lee on LaMelo and the team as a whole. That's still to come here, Locked On Hornets. Before we get to the second segment today, I want to tell you that this episode is brought to you by Built. Listen up, renters. Ever feel like you're stuck in this loop of rent payments, just watching your money vanish into thin air? It's time to turn that rent game around and start earning some serious rewards. That's where Built, B-I-L-T, Built Rewards comes in. Built is breaking ground as a neighborhood rewards program that hooks you up with points on your rent. Every month, pay your rent and watch the Built points roll in. Use points to jet off on a dream vacation. Put your points toward a flight or a hotel stay with 500 plus airlines and 700,000 plus hotels and properties. You can also use your points to book fitness studio classes, redeem them toward a future rent payment. They're designed to meet your lifestyle, and pay rent hassle-free through the Built Rewards app. Your rent game just got a major upgrade. Built points have been consistently ranked the highest value point currency by the Points Guy and Bankrate. Earn points by paying rent right now when you go to joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNBA. That's JOINBILT. Joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNBA. Make sure to use the URL so they know that we sent you. Make sure you use our URL so they know that we sent you. Joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNBA to start earning points with your rent payments today. This episode, it's also brought to you by Game Time. Game Time?
Game time?
Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And we've gone through the perks a million times. I'm going to go through them 1,000,001 times. Game Time Picks curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. They have all-in pricing. Toggling this feature shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout, which is my favorite. Get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy with the seat views. And finally, lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA. Locked On NBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time.
Game time.
More Locked On Hornets ahead. It happened again, Doug. LaMelo had a couple of unnecessary fouls. If you just want to go to the total amount of fouls from LaMelo, which it's been a topic of discussion, there was only 3 last night, but you just went over how they happened and how quickly they happened, specifically the way that it went down at the end of the third quarter. Charles Lee, there was a moment with Charles Lee on the sideline where he was visibly frustrated, and he talked with LaMelo after taking an unnecessary transition take foul. And he goes right to the bench after that conversation with Charles. He also spoke about it after the game. But before we get to that comment, or if you just want to get to it, Doug, what are your thoughts on all of this with Charles having the comments that we went through yesterday? And now here he is again. Like, he's very visibly, very publicly frustrated with LaMelo.
Public displays of correction, which can always get very interesting when we're talking about professional sports and professional athletes who are making a lot of money, typically a lot more money than the head coach that is issuing those public displays of correction. That is the case with LaMelo, who is making $35 million plus a year. I don't know that Charles Lee's contract is $35 million a year. So you always have to be careful there. And yeah, I think talking to LaMelo is underselling it a little bit. It's not, I mean, he wasn't that ULM line coach who like went after the player. It wasn't angry, but it was it was like frustrated dad energy where he, remember when I used to say he had a look in his eye? Like he had a look in his eye and he grabbed, LaMelo wanted to just scoot on by after that third foul. And it was only 3 fouls, but I already said like how egregious the fouls were. And then it was funny too, because EC and Dell right before those fouls mentioned, hey, LaMelo's only got 1 foul. He's doing well. And it's like, he can't help but give in to the vices. And I think it's because he is pressing, because he wants to turn things around so badly, and he's just not doing it in a smart way. But Lee, when he goes to the sideline, LaMelo tries to scoot past Lee, and Lee kind of grabs him by the arm and pulls him in and has a word with him. And yeah, he had that look in his eye. It like excites me and scares me at the same time. I don't know if you have that same feeling, Walker. Like, it excites me that the best player on your team who does have some real issues is having those issues addressed. Because that's only going to make your team better if the player in LaMelo Ball is receptive to it. What scares me is that it's happening in public, and egos and things that can happen and drama that we haven't heard a lot from LaMelo on the microphone in terms of what he thinks about some of this stuff. But if we start to, he's making a lot of money. It could really derail a season that's supposed to be about development. It's supposed to be about, getting this team moving in the right direction, functioning well as an organization where they haven't functioned well before. Doing this stuff in public can get dicey unless there's a really great relationship between player and coach.
Well, and I hope there's a great relationship. Charles Lee did talk about that communication portion of their relationship. He said it's a great partnership, a lot of communication, and me understanding that LaMelo is such a creative mind, trying to connect with this creative mind. I do think that he's a visual learner, too. The film sessions have been really productive when he and I can sit down and talk about it. This is what's expected of you. This is the level of depth that I need you to get to in a pick and roll coverage. And there's a couple of other things that he said, but the last sentence is, so he's curious, you want me to do this? How do I do that better? Having those mature conversations with him has been a joy. You laugh. Why do you laugh?
I laugh because he's a visual learner. I wonder if he's learning visually from the look that's in Charles Lee's eye during these games. Look, Lee's under pressure. All these guys are under pressure to win. And so when stuff like that happens that is overwhelmingly frustrating, it's going to be difficult to contain that. And we saw at times Clifford show his frustration. I don't recall Borrego showing that, and I think part of the reason why he's not coach anymore is because there was a little bit of an accountability issue with these players. Like, honestly, so much of the stuff that's happening with LaMelo right now, the difficulty of it is that it is happening in year 5 when he's making $35 million and not when he's a rookie or a sophomore. And, injuries are a part of that because he missed so much time where this kind of thing could happen. But, it's just, I think it's going to be much more difficult to do these things, particularly out in public. Clifford would talk a lot about these guys making a lot of money. When you come to them with stuff, you got to go to the locker room. You got to have evidence. This isn't college, Walker. This isn't college. Like, this stuff can get dicey when you start capturing it on camera and players go back and see that.
So I guess the public portion of what happened last night is the display of emotion from Charles Lee, because it wasn't public in form of him going to podium and then talking about LaMelo in some way that was derogatory. Do you
Nobody
feel
has criticized. He has criticized him publicly in that last game. We read those quotes where he criticized him publicly in a way, again, I never heard Borrego do. Clifford would do it, but it would be in code. I speculate that's because I think part of that was that they were trying to sign LaMelo to the contract, and you don't want to put wrenches into that whole thing. But Lee is doing things publicly, both in game and after game, that aren't necessarily derogatory, but they're critical in a way that no one has been with him before.
Do you view coaching as a sign of disrespect if it's even hinted at the podium, even if Charles Lee is wearing your brand and is going out of his way to make sure that he's got the LaFrance on right in front of your face? Do you still feel like this is some kind of trade-off, and now it makes Charles Lee feel more comfortable criticizing, quote unquote, or really just coaching LaMelo? Does LaMelo feel like he's being disrespected with the way that Charles Lee says he's got to get better on that end of the floor? We know that Charles Lee is an honest guy. I will tell you, if LaMelo has a real big issue with this thing going public in the form that it's already been public, where he's had some comments at the podium a little bit, but it's not like he's berated LaMelo. He's just always challenged LaMelo more so than he said, LaMelo's no good on the defensive end. He's been terrible. I need to come in and fix this up. We need to make sure that he's constantly paying attention. He's a great learner, right? Like he's sandwiching this in the middle of some positive comments on either side. So it's not like he's berating him. We're reading between the lines and understanding what Charles Lee is thinking behind those closed doors. And look, I know that LaMelo, or I know that some players might not like being publicly talked about that way, but this is also like somewhat of the NBA. Charles Lee can't lie the entire time. So I just, look, LaMelo had a really good relationship with Steve Clifford, by all accounts. But both of those guys seem to enjoy each other. Steve Clifford talked about LaMelo's work ethic and coachability. Charles Lee continues to say the same things, at least behind those closed doors. Any problem that we feel like LaMelo might have is all speculation, right? We don't know that LaMelo has a real issue with this. We just see the issues on the court right now, specifically on that end of the floor, but we don't know that LaMelo has any issues with it. And I'm hoping that he doesn't have any issues and that everybody is able to live in holy matrimony.
Well, listen, this is all new territory. It's new territory for us to have a star player of LaMelo Ball's caliber that also has some issues that need to be corrected, and like the relationship between coach and player that way. Like, you know, Kemba and Clifford went about it in a very quiet way. And Kemba, just in terms of like star ceiling, it didn't have the same kind of thing that LaMelo has going on. And, you know, and LaMelo has a brand. Like Kemba wasn't like a brand guy, wasn't, I just like, you didn't associate him with like, I'm going to be out there in public and on social media and have a brand and an image that I want to uphold. And again, I'm not, LaMelo has done nothing so far to voice any kind of frustration. He doesn't voice a lot really in general. Yeah. This is also new territory for LaMelo to be critiqued in this way. It's new territory for Coach Lee, who is a first-time head coach, and having these responsibilities. It's different than being an assistant coach. You're not going to the podium every night. You're not being asked these questions every night. You're not having the camera constantly focused on you when a player comes off and your interaction with them. So I'm just saying all this can get dicey. I did say when Lee was first hired that I felt like Lee was going to bring the championship cachet and come in and say, this is how it's going to go. And there were going to be some players that I felt were going to bristle at that and some players that won't. And it'll be interesting to see how committed the franchise is to holding on to the players that are buying into what Lee is selling, or if they're more committed to saying, well, we paid a guy $35 million, so, you know, we probably should just figure out a way to work with him instead of trying to make him into something he's not. It's all, again, new territory. It's all going to be very interesting to watch.
Yeah, we're only 7 games in, baby. Strap in. Got a long season to go. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Bees everywhere!
More LaMelo, more Charles Lee, more observations from last night's game still to come here on Locked On Hornets. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can get ready to tackle the second half of the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5. You can get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Look, this episode is also brought to you by Hims, and your sex life is important, but your schedule is busy. You don't have the time to go to a doctor's office to get treated for ED. Through Hims, you can get a personalized ED treatment without stepping foot outside your door. Hims is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. Hims provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints and Viagra and Cialis and their generics for up to 95% cheaper. The process is 100% online, so there's no need for uncomfortable doctor's visits. Just answer a series of questions on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option. If prescribed, your medication ships directly to you in discreet packaging for free. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. With hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, Hims can help you find the ED option that works for you. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS, hims.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. hims.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable compounded products which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. More Locked On Hornets ahead. Other observations, Doug, what you got for me after watching this game against Minnesota?
I got a Pearly Pearl from Sam Pearly, who before the game commented on Taj Gibson getting the starts. He said, per stat head, Taj Gibson will be the third oldest player to ever start a game for the Hornets at 39 years old and 133 days, behind only the Chief, Robert Parrish, at 42 years old, 235 days, and Dale Ellis, 39 years old, 212 days.
I would have gotten Robert Parrish. I would not have gotten Dale Ellis. That's one that sneaks in there. Because I think everybody knows, especially with the Celtics and the championships, everyone knows that Parrish had like this weird twilight season here in the Queen City. Dale Ellis, that one sneaks by me quite a bit. Didn't Chuck Person have like a weird Hornets season too? Just another shooter, old shooter in a Hornets unit, and comes to mind. Taj Gibson, this is where they went looking for a center, even though Taj has mainly been a power forward in his career. This has been only the second game that he appeared in. He appeared on Saturday against the Celtics 4 minutes, and here he played 16 minutes out of necessity. It's what is hurting this team. Mark Williams coming back, I think, would be a big, big deal for this squad. Can they hold on, though? Because, as I mentioned, they're past what is a really tough portion of their schedule. Boston back-to-back, Minnesota. Now they're at home, Doug. They play the Pistons. They play the Pacers at home, too. Then they hit the road again, 76ers Magic at home against the Bucks. So they still have a couple of like tough competitive teams coming up, but at least you get a game at home against Detroit. Do we dabble again? Do we dabble in the must-win category? Nah, I can't pull that out. But it would be certainly nice to get the third victory of the season against Detroit.
Yeah, so Brandon Miller returns in this game, 10 points, 2 rebounds, 1 assist. Other than the dunk that he laid where Miles Bridges caught him in transition and Randall didn't want any part of it, Brandon Miller yammed it. He's got to be careful with these. I don't want him to tear another booty cheek. He's got to be just careful. But 3 of 10 from the field. He's just kind of quietly getting back into gear.
Yeah.
He just didn't make much. You didn't notice him very much in this game other than that dunk. Trey Mann actually led the team in game score according to Pivot Fade. There weren't very high game scores here, obviously, but he only had 10 points, and yet it was, he had 6 assists. And so I think a lot of people will look at that and say, yeah, but Doug, you said that there were problems when Trey Mann was on the floor. It's because like the offense gums up, man. I mean, the ball doesn't move. The ball sticks for just a little bit too long. And I say this particularly because they just got off these 2 games with Boston, where, man, that offense just like there's no wasted movement. There are no wasted passes. The screens come quick and they come heavy and they come precise. They're not getting offensive fouls on these screens. And it's just deadly. Guys pulling up quickly. Everyone's making the right decision. And then you put that in, like the Hornets sit in sharp relief where the ball just like stays with Miles Bridges or it stays with Mann or it stays with Brandon Miller just a half second too long, which in the NBA allows defenses to like get set, get adjusted, and then be able, particularly good defenses like Boston. I mean, Minnesota.
I mean,
they just decided to play defense. They hadn't really played great defense all season, and they said, all right, this is the get right game against Charlotte. And they decided to, really, particularly Jaden McDaniels. My God. I mean, he tortured LaMelo. He tortured Trey Mann. It was tough to watch.
I believe there were some possessions where he was on Brandon Miller too. And Brandon was trying to, free himself up.
How can he guard all 5 guys at the same time? Like, what is he doing?
It was tough. It was tough sledding for everybody. And again, if you just want to look at some of the advanced metrics on this game, Doug, I mentioned it. It might have been the worst offensive performance in the season so far based on points per possession. They were in the first percentile. They scored 71 points per on 80 possessions. They ended up with 93 overall. I'm looking at some of the other stats that are mentioned here by Cleveland.
Well, look at second chance points. Now they won the battle 14-9, but 14's not enough for this team. This team is not right now built to be a half-court team. They've got to steal points by crashing the glass, and 14 is not enough. They needed that margin 14-9 to be higher to have a chance in this game, and that's where not having the size hurts you. First of all, Nick Richards, really good offensive rebounder. But they just couldn't crash the offensive glass enough, and there was enough size and physicality from Minnesota to keep them off the board. So that hurt them as well.
And by the way, just to give context to some of those numbers, right? Like cleaning the glass, it's important to remember they exclude garbage time. That started with 8 minutes, 7 seconds left in the fourth quarter. So everything that
white
happened
flag went early in this one.
so right, when I say 71 points on 80 possessions, and you're like, wait, Walker, they scored 93. What are you talking about? Yes, but cleaning the glass, they try to really dwindle it down into important stats during meaningful basketball, and that's why they exclude the garbage time. 8 minutes, this game was already decided, and Minnesota ended up winning.
I will shout out Tijan Salon, who didn't shoot very well in this game from the field and did a lot of that shooting in that period where, he was allowed to. Like, I mean, where he's playing alongside the rest of the deep bench Bs when the white flag had already been thrown. So, I thought he was generally offensively disciplined when he was getting legitimate minutes in this game. And then there were 3 possessions where he bottled up Anthony Edwards. I don't know if Edwards just wasn't ready for the length or the movement if he just thought he could easily get by Salon. Where Salon struggles, where he struggled in this game and where he has struggled is against physical bigs. Like he can gobble up guards occasionally or smaller forwards. Like I think Edwards is 6'4", like he's super strong, but he's a little bit shorter. And where he struggles, though, is like Randall ran right through him. He struggled with the bigger guys are just going to move right through him. And on help defense, he's just, I don't mean this in a mean way. It's just honest. Like he's virtually useless in terms of help defense. He just doesn't know how to get over in time. And when he gets over, he doesn't really know how to react to the play and make an impact. And so those are the big things that he's got to improve on. But, he's hanging in there.
He is hanging in there. And by the way, like we mentioned, it was Naz Reid and Dante DiVincenzo off of the bench. I mean, they had 8 3-pointers made on 13 attempts. DiVincenzo, like Eric Collins, was beside himself with that game, with that shot that he hit at the end of the third quarter. Just ISO, dribble, fade, just complete cash. And I don't know what else you can do on that defensive possession. It was working for DiVincenzo. Second and third quarter, big differences in the game.
Yeah, you cannot foul like LaMelo did prior to that to give the momentum back to Minnesota. Like you can keep your offense in rhythm and not allow that possession to take place. That's what you can do. But the Hornets right now don't have enough Dante DiVincenzo level players that can come off the bench and do that thing. From them, they have Trey Mann, but beyond that, And the 3-point shots from Anthony Edwards, it was a lot of going under on Anthony, which I didn't understand. Like, read the scouting report. He's shooting more threes. He's telling bleep them to the critics who are saying he's taking too many threes. Like, read the scouting report. I wrote in my notes, stop going under on Anthony Edwards. The Naz Reid stuff, a lot of that were just mistakes on defense. And guys, getting Mark Williams and Nick Richards back, not going to solve that problem. It makes it a little bit easier if you make a mistake, but if they drive. But the 3-point shots are not going to help that.
Well, and so let's end on this. Charles Lee, worst game for Charles Lee? with some of those decisions, right? Going under on screens. I know people were frustrated, even if it was more so maybe using the bench as the motivator, but also taking LaMelo out, putting Trey Mann back in. That was after they came back with LaMelo out on the floor. They bring him out. And of course, what do you see? You see the Hornets start to go down again. There were lots of criticisms for Charles Lee last night in the way that he coached that game.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I think, starting Taj Gibson worked out well to begin the game. I thought that was a good decision.
Instead
it's
of
tough,
Diamante
man.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know if that was his call to go under on those screens. That question wasn't asked after the game, so I don't know if that was his call or if that was a mistake necessarily. But I think he's in a tough position. He's trying to figure it out without a lot of shot makers. Their 3-point shooting in this game was awful without the two centers. It's difficult, but yeah, there were some decisions certainly. Sitting Micic, I guess they felt like they have to do it, but not having another playmaker is killing them.
Well, there's a Micic conversation for us to have when we have more time. Yeah, the 3-point shot.
We'll have plenty of time tomorrow. No games on the slate.
Well, and just to put it in perspective, like last year, Doug, the Hornets were shooting at most, they would give you in 2024, like they would get above 50 3-point attempts. Like every now and then. It happened a couple times in 2024, the 2023-2024 season. They got to the high 40s, but like that was among the most amount of 3-point field goal attempts they would take. They got to 42 in this game. They're going to be firing. Like the Hornets are just going to be firing a bunch of threes this year, and they just didn't go in as well, which is also going to hurt the offense. And we know the roller coaster type of year. We went through it at the beginning of this season. We went through it with the Rockets, where they were down, but then they come back because they're hitting more threes. Like threes, I know the math people will tell you, like a lot of what goes down in a game is 3-point shot making, and it looks like the missing of all those 3-point shots really hurt this offense last night.
Well, they were missing because they were low quality threes, and they only took 18 in the first half. I don't know what the garbage time. If you take out garbage time, what the 3-point attempt rate would have been. I would guess it would have been below average. They weren't taking a lot of threes, and again, credit Minnesota's defense. They were taking some things away, but I don't think the Hornets were adamant enough, particularly in the first half, about getting into the paint first and then kicking out to three. There just wasn't a lot of that happening. It was a lot of passing around the perimeter, guys making a couple of dribbles and then pulling up.
Well, and they're still like a top 5, top 3 team frequency. It was over 40 the second game against Boston, 48 the first game against Boston. Like that would have been top 5 most attempted field goals from distance last year. They're heaving it, baby, and that's
heaving. That's a good word. That was a good word to describe what was happening last night. It was not shot taking. It was heaving.
Yeah, that's what was going on, and that's what's been going on in large portions. Hopefully they're higher quality shots. Charles Lee made the distinction. It's not just more threes, it's higher quality threes, but last night I don't think you got a lot of that. That'll do it for Locked On Hornets. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free. We're available anywhere you get your pods, and that does include YouTube. Make sure you subscribe, not only to the pod still, wherever you get your pods, but also Doug's Substack, everyhornetsboxscore.com. And you can listen to me, WFNZ, every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. Have a great rest of your day. Try to keep the anxiety out as much as possible, and we'll be back with you tomorrow.
Why? What's going on?